Today, I've got the host of one of my favourite podcasts, Rachel Lauren Baker, from her podcast, Don't Be So Dramatic. Rachel is an actress and filmmaker based in Sydney, Australia. Rachel has a Bachelor of Performance from the University of Wollongong and has been privately tutored by award-winning director and acting coach Ben Matthews, comedy expert Darren Gillishane, and renowned coach and actor Emily Joy. Rachel has played roles in numerous independent film projects as well as TVCs for Neutrogena, Sprite, KFC and Supercars Australia. As a producer and writer, Rachel has created projects such as her short films Behind Closed Doors and Nobody Likes Camping. In 2018, Rachel created the Don't Be So Dramatic podcast with the intention to dive deeper into the careers of people working in the entertainment industry so that aspiring as well as successful creatives could get to know their peers and role models through an accessible medium. I think you get a lot out of the episode where we dive into the background of her podcast and how she draws on the stories of her guests to provide a deeper insight for our listeners. We also finish up talking about a new business venture, mindset coaching for actors, which is also a great topic that you will walk away with some pointers on making your acting career or your life in general just that little bit more enriched. We had some technical issues which were overcome, but I've opened the show with some behind-the-scenes discussions which happened before the technical side of things, so which is quite funny later on when you hear about the technical issue. So here we go. Enjoy the wonderful Rachel Baker.
Oh, yeah. When I interviewed Anthony Mendel, half of the interview, I think it was like his internet on his end, because like when I went to then go, oh, cool, I'll download the audio and video, halfway through, it just completely cut his video and audio. No. So I had to go back and re-record the second half of the interview.
You're talking about that. That was really good that he came back to do that. So.
I'm glad it happened with someone who's so lovely and was like, don't worry about it. And I was like, there's nothing you can do about feeling disappointed and a bit of an idiot. But yeah, it is what it is sometimes.
All right, well, that's uploading in the background, so we're ready to go. Everything seems perfect. And good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're coming from. We are back with another episode of The Late Bloomer Actor, and in the house today, I have the wonderful Rachel going from the podcast Don't Be So Dramatic. Hi, Rachel. How are you going?
I'm good. Hello. Good morning. What did you say? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening. I think there was a TV show about that somehow. So I'm getting a little bit of that fan-based performance anxiety that we get because I've been listening to you. You're pretty much my first podcast that I listened to as an actor.
Really?
When I'd never heard of podcasts really, and then I thought I'll go and someone told me about podcasts and you get some great acting ones. So the first one I found, or either you found me, I can't remember, but you were my first podcast as an actor that I started listening to, and it's been a wonderful journey. So thank you.
Oh my God. Wow. Well, thank you. That hits me in the heart. I'm going to try not to cry on this episode, but who knows?
That's a bit like Gogglebox on TV. I watch with my wife, and pretty much every episode, there's always one thing that they show that makes people cry, makes them cry, and then makes the audience cry. So that's a goal to reach.
Someone cried on my podcast. Yes.
I love it. I just did a weekend with Lou Heasem at Heasem Casting, and there's a few tears that weekend with some really, really good scenes. So emotions are good.
Yeah. See, you've released all your tears, whereas I had a pretty cruisy weekend. So maybe mine are all stored up for this moment.
Good. That's good. We built it up, ready to go.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, before we dive into the nitty gritty, just for my listeners and that, can you just give us a little bit of a background of who Rachel is, where you come from, how you got into acting, and then lead into how Don't Be So Dramatic, your podcast, came to be a thing?
Sure. So, hello, I'm Rachel. I grew up south of Sydney on the south coast, and so acting for me, interestingly enough, I think it's a similar story to a lot of actors where you grow up enjoying drama and all that sort of thing at school. which was interesting because I knew that I enjoyed doing drama. But it wasn't until my mum one day, I think I was about maybe like 14 or something, she said, "Oh, I've signed you up for after school drama classes." And I remember being like, why? I didn't really, the two things in my brain didn't connect where I was like, I like drama, that's why I would do it after school. I was like, why would you sign me up for that? That's so weird. And then went and I was like, oh, okay, that's because I like doing drama stuff and like being an actor. And so, yeah, just kind of continued it throughout school and doing it after school. And then when it came to picking what I wanted to do after school, unfortunately for every other like subject at school, the only thing I cared about was being an actor and doing drama. So I was like, yeah, I'm obviously going to go and study acting after school. There was just like no other path that I could see. And so I did a Bachelor of Performance at the University of Wollongong, which interestingly enough was a fully theatre-based course. So I actually was fully trained in theatre and had no idea about screen acting. And so that was a really interesting transition to kind of make, because I also was very green when I went into that course. And I would say probably very green coming out of it as well. I didn't really know about the industry at all. And I think that that's, unfortunately, there are some courses out there where that's like the shortfall of the course, is that they will teach you how to act and the techniques of acting, but they won't teach you about the industry. And that's not all drama courses, but that's just my experience and what I have heard from other people. So it took me a little while in my 20s to kind of work out how does one be an actor in the industry? How does one go about getting work? And discovering that there's actually not a lot of theatre work out there, and that I needed to learn how to act on screen. So I spent a lot of my 20s doing that, trying to work it out by myself. And I always had that classic thought of, oh man, I wish my parents had gotten me an agent when I was 12. You know, so this would be so much easier. But I think
the old woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Oh, absolutely. And so I think that acknowledging that mentality, I think everyone's journey is different, and that's what makes everyone as an actor an exciting actor, because we all have different experiences.
Yes.
So how did the podcast come about? As I was in my 20s, and I actually started filmmaking as well. I started making web series and short films. So I was kind of what we all know to be like our slashy kind of roles now, which a lot of actors do, is like they produce, they write, they direct, they do all the things. I was doing that in my 20s just to kind of give myself work to do, and I enjoyed collaborating and creating and that sort of thing. So with the podcast, that was 2018 that I started that, I think 2018, 2019. I think
I had that. I think I read that somewhere as well.
Okay,
that sounds familiar. So
good. I'm glad I wrote that down somewhere. That was kind of the time where podcasts were starting to become popular, and people were listening to different podcasts, and I would listen to them being like, I just feel like I could do this. And not in like an arrogant way, because podcasting, you know, is a skill. I don't know. I just like, I put it down to like an intuitional feeling of like, I think I should go towards this thing. And mind you, not really knowing anything about podcasting or anything about recording. So I really had to teach myself how to podcast. I did know how to edit audio very basically. So there was that. But in terms of like microphones and how the hell do you upload a podcast and where does it go and how do you connect it and blah, 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 and all like the very technical, boring things that people don't really realize is a thing about podcasting, I had to teach myself how to do it. Now,
did you learn the hard way by just going straight into your first episode and finding all the technical issues while you're trying to first record your first guest? Did you do it that way? Oops, I've lost you for a sec there, Rachel. We were talking about technical issues, and now we're having one. Hang on, we're waiting for you to connect if you can still hear me.
But you know what? Like, I feel like I'm the best person to have technical issues with, because I just sit back and I'm like, oh man, I get it. I so understand.
Well, wait for the upload to start, make sure. So what happened to you on my end? You just disappeared picture and audio, but it just said 99% uploaded, like it didn't even finish. So it's like it just froze on our connection. And then when you I think we got cut off there. We were mid-sentence talking about technical issues of your first episode, and then we went and had our own issues. So we're not going to mention the word again, are we?
No, what word? I don't even know what you're talking about.
So let's continue on anyway. So we were talking about your podcast starting in 2018 and your learnings of building that up.
Yes. So you know what? I did forget to kind of talk about the why I started it. So maybe thank you, universe, for reminding me that I had skipped a little bit. The reason why I started the podcast. So I was interested in listening to podcasts and I was like, oh, I think I can do that. I was looking for podcasts that I wanted to listen to about the Australian industry as an actor. And at the time, the only podcasts that I could really find was like the Screen Australia podcast, or similar to, I don't know if they were up and running then, or like the Cinema Australia podcast. And they're all great podcasts, but it wasn't an interviewer that I felt like they weren't an actor. And I just didn't have that like connection of like, oh, they know what I'm going through. So there was this kind of gap in the industry at the time where I was like, well, I really want to provide content that would be the content that I would want to listen to as an actor and a creative. I've always been really interested in people's stories, like, you know, why did you start a podcast, David? Like, you know, I really get interested in why people make choices and like where it leads them to. And I also really like hearing it not from the perspective of like, and how can this be applicable to actors? And what I mean by that is like, you know, when you do a casting workshop and the casting director is like, you can ask me any questions, and actors, rightly so, ask the casting director like, what can I do as an actor with my show reel to get it in front of you, blah, 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 whatever. And I was always kind of like, what I wanted to know so I could get to know this person better. Like, why did you become a casting director? Like, what do you like about your job?
Yes.
Like, I was more just interested, and you can probably notice that in my episodes when I interview like a director or a producer or a casting director, I don't really like to be like, and how can actors do blah, blah, blah? Like, I'm not really concerned with, can you give advice to actors? I just kind of want to know what their opinions are, like what their journey is.
What their story is, so to speak. And that would just come naturally anyway, because they're talking about the business they're in. So you're going to get the gossip, for want of a better of a word, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I hope it does with people listening to the episode is, one, it makes this person seem way more human than they used to be. Like, specifically people who are quite successful in the industry, I think it's only natural to put them on a pedestal, but then to realize, oh, they're just people like me, and they're just doing human things like me. And then I hope it also like secondarily builds rapport with this person. So you kind of find out a little bit more about who they are rather than them just being like a casting director and that's all you know them as.
Yes.
So that was kind of why I wanted to start the podcast. And also, to be honest, it's a great networking tool. It's like, to the people that I've interviewed, a lot of them, I would never have gotten into a one-on-one conversation with them just as an actor. Like if I went up to Nikki Barrett and went, hey, Nikki, can I sit down with you for an hour and just talk about stuff with you? I'm an actor. She would be like, no, I've got things
too busy.
to do. Yeah. But to be able to have a podcast and be like, hey, I'm a podcaster. Oh, and also I'm an actor. I'd love to talk to you about, you know, casting, directing. It's such a great in to start knowing these people. It's an easy in, to be honest. And do I recommend people start a podcast just so that they can get in the room with certain people? No. For me, it was a great networking tool. So yeah, I kind of started and just, I don't like this phrase, but I failed forward. And just kind of, yeah. So obviously it's the idea of like, you just start and, you know, if you're going to fail, at least you're going to fail forward and keep up that momentum. I'm yet to come up with like a better phrasing for it, but I will.
I like it. I like that one.
And yeah, at the start, you know, I made plenty of mistakes. I've actually archived a fair few of my first episodes just purely because like not out of like, oh my God, they're so bad. Like I'm happy for people to realize kind of where I came from. But when you get to a certain point and it's like a business decision to kind of be like, I don't think they necessarily reflect what the podcast is now.
Fair enough.
And so, you know, happy to archive them. So if you go back, there's some that just aren't there anymore. But yeah, then it just kind of kept going, to be honest. I just kept recording and was like, oh, okay, I'm a podcaster. And then I think it must have been 2 years in, the Hub Studio, which is a studio, an acting studio in Sydney. I happened to interview Ollie, who's the owner of the studio. And at the time he was like, hey, we were actually wanting to start a Hub Studio podcast, but we don't have the time. Would you like want to be associated with the studio? Would that help you out? And I was like, well, yeah, it absolutely would, because you then have that name behind you to be like, oh, this is the Don't Be So Dramatic podcast, which is in association with the Hub Studio. And so from there, not only did I start getting more traction because of the actor base that like knew the Hub Studio, but also I got access to all the industry people that they had emails for. Nice. And I could be like, can I have this person's email? Can I have that person's email? And so it gave me a bit more like notoriety to then approach people and be like, hey, I'm this podcast in association with the Hub Studio. And usually like people would know that name and be like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll come on your podcast. So that was a really great achievement. And then I think I was associated with them for maybe 2 years. I don't know timelines. I should really write them down for interviews, but I really ballpark it because it all kind of like merges into one for me.
Aren't we great as actors? Our memory, we're supposed to have good memories, and I'm the same. I go, oh, I can't remember what I'm supposed to be talking about.
Oh, I can remember lines. Maybe that's why, because every time I'm learning lines, it's pushing out other information, which is like how time periods of the podcast. I'm like, I don't need to know that. But yeah, what was interesting was I feel like a lot of my decisions for my career are made off intuition, like that feeling that you get, you know?
Nice.
And so 2 years in, I kind of felt like I had outgrown the Hub. I didn't know what, but I wanted more. And I kind of felt like at the time, any business decision or anything the hub said or did online, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but unfortunately it, like, I was a part of that brand, and so I couldn't really control, like, if they were promoting something that I didn't necessarily agree with, or they said something online that I didn't necessarily agree with, or maybe, like, it was just this feeling of, like, I think that I need to, like, part ways kind of thing. And I felt like I was then I had enough, like, notoriety in the industry that I kind of didn't, unfortunately, this sounds bad, but I didn't really need them anymore. So no bad blood or anything like that. It was just this feeling, you know, like, that I was like, okay, I think I need to kind of move forward again. And so I made the decision to part ways with the hub. And funnily enough, as soon as that happened, one of my good friends, Alyssa, started her own talent management agency called ASM. And she was like, hey, I'd really love, and I'm good friends with Liz. So yes, that is why she contacted me. So Liz approached me and said, hey, I've just started this talent management agency. I'd love to rep your podcast. And I was like, absolutely, like, any help I can get, sure. And Liz was my friend, so I felt like a good kind of connection there. And so then within, I think it was about 5 months after, like, we'd, you know, done the signing of the paper and all that.
You had my soul.
Legal. Yes, yeah. Kind of thing. Liz, unbeknownst to me, so I feel like many times I just get blindsided by great opportunities, which is great because it means that, like, you know, you just kind of have to be you and do your thing, and things will just come to you. That's the kind of mentality that I have. But yeah, unbeknownst to me, Liz knew that it would be great to get the podcast signed to a network, so a podcast network. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. I don't know what that means, but sure.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, you do you. Like, that's cool. And so she then got in contact with DM Podcasts, who is one of the top podcasting networks in Australia and is run by the guys who are the Batuta Advocate. So if you know that, that Instagram account / that business with the fake news stuff and all that sort of thing, they run DM Podcasts as well. And yeah, she was like, yeah, I've lined up a meeting with them. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Wow. Yeah, no worries. And they ended up being like, yeah, we're, you know, interested to have you, to sign you and see where it goes, kind of thing. So that happened, which was pretty crazy. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I felt like throughout this whole process, like, I slowly was like, I guess I'm a proper podcaster now. Like,
proper one.
A proper one, not a for funsies one, like a proper podcaster now. That's been great, being with DM, because then I actually get access to their studio, which means I can record in studio. I'm able to go in and record in their Sydney office, which is all set up, and that can be like in person with a guest, or that can be over Riverside, which is what we're using now. And that's been great because it's helped me learn about, like, ad revenue. So that's what a podcast network does, is able to, because they have so many podcasts on their kind of list, they have access to adding ads into your podcast. And so then you get the revenue from that.
Still got control of the brand. You know, they don't be so dramatic. You own it. You have the artistic license still to go down. They don't control anything like that.
No, I don't have control over the brand, and they're just more there to kind of, if you want it, they can give you guidance as well, which is great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And with your show, very much like my show, where you chat to guests that have been a pivotal part of my journey, many of your guests have been part of yours. How important is it to you that you have that personal connection with your guests, and what do you get from those interviews, both for yourself and for your guests? And I must say that two of my favorite episodes from you is with Mark Morrissey. And then on the acting side, you got to talk to Noni Hazelhurst.
Yeah.
Which was that was wonderful episode. She was so giving in the chat with you, wasn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I remember from the Noni interview, which really sticks with me, is when she's talking about her being at drama school, and they said like a room of, I think it was maybe like 100 actors, and they said out of 100 actors, there's going to be 2 of you that succeed. And Noni said, and I looked around the room and I wondered who the other actor was going to be that would succeed. And I just think that like that is such an example of how powerful mindset is as an actor and as a creative. I just love that little like tidbit from the interview.
Go with the segue there for mindset. So is that what's led you to your current another side hustle? I believe today you've just started a new side business in mind setting. Let me let you explain that to us. What's happening there?
Sorry, I didn't answer that last question that you had. I just went off and talked
about
Noni.
No, you did.
Okay, that's good.
It's about that connection and about what you get.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
You were talking earlier about some of the first podcasts you listened to, and so they're interviews. They're journalists, and there's a big difference between a journalist interview and then someone like us having a chat with someone.
Absolutely.
It's such a different story.
Yeah. And I think what I'll just say before I move on to talking about mindset coaching is that core is so important both in, I think, in every aspect of this industry, to be honest. And so it's been my goal to get very good at being able to get quick rapport with someone, especially a guest, to find a connection quite quickly, because those are the best interviews, is when you can feel like these two people are connected. And that's a massive thing with mindset coaching as well, which I will go into, but I'll explain what my business is. So if you have listened to Don't Be So Dramatic before, it maybe wouldn't come as a surprise that because I talked about mindset so often on the podcast, and it is a subject that I absolutely just love talking about in regards to actors and creatives. And so towards the end of last year, I found myself being quite lost in regards to just work in general. And, you know, we all know that as an actor, unfortunately, you do sometimes have to have a day job to pay those bills before, you know, you can book another acting gig. And my day job was, not to be dramatic, but it was killing my soul. And I say that from a place of privilege. Like, I realize that it is a very, very privileged position to be like, I can't do this anymore, and to just, you know, quit. So towards the end of last year, I was really having like an existential crisis of like, I can't keep doing this job that I just hate. And it's like a pretty toxic workplace, you know, it was, and that kills your creativity as well. You know, not being able to feel creative was, it was just awful. Like it really was. And I knew that I wanted to work for myself, because I feel like, as you can probably see with the podcast, I'm like quite a driven person, and I can like get under myself and push myself to like do things, which is good, and stick to
and
a
have
schedule.
That control as well.
Yeah, exactly. So literally one day I was like, oh my God, why don't I become a mindset coach? Because I love talking about it so often on the podcast. Like, it just kind of, it made sense in my mind to be like, okay, this is something that you could really like actually make a business out of and be passionate about. Because with the podcast, the other thing that I wanted it to do was inspire people to see like, hey, these people have done it. You can do it too. There's no formula, which is great, because if there's no formula, you don't have to follow a certain journey to succeed.
Yes.
And so that's what I am taking into my mindset coaching, which is like literally I want actors to feel like the biggest dreams that they have are possible and are going to happen for them. And
Nice.
I think people get scared when they hear that because they think, oh, but what if it doesn't happen? And it's like, okay, well, let's work on that. Why is that doubt there, kind of thing? So I went away and I got certified as an NLP practitioner, which is a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, which basically means that I learned a bunch of techniques which all speak to the unconscious mind and take you through releasing doubt, releasing like major negative emotions, releasing limiting beliefs or like conflicts within yourself. And then what we can also do is then really visualize what it is that you want and place that into your future so that you believe, cool, this is going to happen. Like this is in my future, kind of thing. And there are other techniques that we can do. Like there's one that Mike Tyson used when he was a boxer, which is something called anchoring, which is like, say, David, you got really nervous before auditions and you were like, I'm so overwhelmed by this nervous feeling. What we could do is anchor in what would be like maybe confidence. And so we would erase the nervous feeling. And usually it's a physical trigger. So I don't know if people are watching this and they can see my fingers, but what you can do is anchor in a physical trigger. So when I do this, like with my fingers, you get filled with that feeling of confidence. And I know it sounds like how, but it's literally what Mike Tyson used when he was walking to the ring to then fight someone. And when,
it's interesting. That's a memory technique as well, anchoring. You know, so that must work on that same mind physical connection.
Yeah,
process.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that's the way that he would prep himself, and essentially is why he was such a successful boxer for so long, is because he was using NLP techniques. And it's very common in the sports industry. Like pretty much all of the most successful athletes have mindset coaches. And, you know, if we know anything, acting is quite similar to being an athlete. You know, don't ask me to run. It's similar in the certain techniques that we use. And so I thought, why not bring that into acting? Because I do know, I've interviewed, was it Angie Ford and Simon Williams are both mindset coaches, but they don't exclusively work with actors. They work with anybody, mostly like athletes, to be honest. Okay. And then they work with actors as well. And so I thought, I saw this kind of gap in the industry and was like, well, what if I was an actor mindset coach and just worked with actors? Because I sure as hell know what it's like to be an actor and to have challenges and to move through them. And I literally want every single person to walk away feeling like they are worthy of their biggest dream and that it is achievable. Because
I talk a lot on my show about the ups and downs of the journey that we're all on, and you know, you have those moments where you're up on a peak, you've just done a great audition, or you've got a job, but then you can come crashing down so quickly and not get a job or be failing in your auditions. And those troughs are just such a mind-numbing experience for actors, and to find a way. And I think the mindset goes in the reverse then, doesn't it? Because you can push yourself further and further to the point that you can actually end up quitting acting. And so it's about finding a way to push through those troughs, I suppose, and that's what you're going to be teaching actors.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, what we're talking about there is there are experiences where you may experience X amount of time that you don't book work. But the interesting thing is about the mind is that we put meaning onto experiences, right? And so what's great about mindset coaching is pinpointing those times. And maybe if you are going through what you called a trough, those are the times that you need to put into practice, though, all those affirmations, all those mindset techniques that you've been using as an actor. That's kind of crunch time. And that's a really good time to have a mindset coach as well. But yeah, it's about kind of, and I'll tell a story that happened to me yesterday, because I don't want people to think that I am perfect at this. And I think it's important for a coach to always be learning and to be learning from their own experiences. So yesterday, I got an email from someone that I'd done an audition from. And when I opened the email, I immediately scanned it to try and find the unfortunately you didn't get the role, blah, blah, blah. And I stopped myself and I went, what am I doing? Because yes, sure, I've gotten plenty of rejections in the past, but why am I making this a negative experience opening this email from the casting person? And so I took a step back, went, okay, let's actually read the email, Rachel, because you don't know what it says yet, and read it. And the email actually said, we'd love you to come in for an in-person audition because we loved your tape so much. And I went, well, I'm so glad that I didn't put that past experience onto this one, because I think it's very natural to, have these kind of limiting beliefs come up. And these, when you are facing a lot of no's, it is hard to still look for that yes, right? But I think it's important to catch yourself, and you get better and better at catching yourself. And so then the no's have less impact and the yeses have such a great impact. So that's a little thing.
So without giving away too many of your secrets, and we'll get you to give us a summary of what you offer as a mindset coach now, but what one thing would you say to actors that they should be doing or could be doing, say on a daily basis, themselves in that right mindset so that they can maintain a positive flow, so to speak?
Yeah, I think, if it's going to be one thing, I would say just actually sitting with yourself and noticing what are the thoughts that are happening around your acting career, Is it that you're super excited about it? And that's awesome. Is it that today you feel like, am I meant to be an actor? That kind of doubt that, plenty of us have felt. I think just actually noticing those things is so important, and writing it down and being like, today I feel this way, because it's okay to feel feelings. Like, I'm not saying emotions are bad and we only want to feel excited about our acting career. It's like just being super aware of that thought pattern that you were having, and then being so aware about the words that you use about your acting career when you're talking about it.
I like that.
Yeah, I think speaking from personal experience, years ago when people would ask that classic question of, what have I seen you in? Have I seen you in anything? Have you been in anything I would have seen? And, before...
I hate that question.
I know, you go, oh, I don't know how to answer that. And it would make the other person feel awkward, and I would feel awkward. And so I would leave feeling not good about being an actor. And so, of course, when you reiterate that time and time again, how are you going to feel about being an actor on a more regular basis? You're going to feel awkward. You're going to feel like you're not good enough. So I got really clear on how I speak about myself as an actor when people ask that question. And now I say, yeah, I've done a bunch of ads that you might have seen, and I've done some independent projects, and yeah, I'm working on something now. So, I might need to sign something for you now because it might be worth something one day. I know that sounds really wanky, but at the same time, no one else is going to be excited about your acting career if you are not. And that's just
facts.
That. Yeah. No one is going to wake up every day and be like, David, just so you know, you're a good actor and I believe in you. You have to do that for yourself. So that's why I say, being really clear on how you're thinking about your career. And it's okay. It's okay if you wake up and you're like, I'm really not feeling it today, but just being aware of that And
Yes.
then, you know, being aware of how you speak about your career as well. The other one that's very common is, and I posted a reel about this the other day, so if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen it, is people saying acting's really hard, you know, and you go, yeah, cool. You know, like a lot of things are a lot of things are allowed to be hard. Hard isn't a negative word. It's we're putting that emotion onto the word hard. And so if you're feeling like, oh, acting is hard, but you're not doing anything about it, why would I want to work with you? Why would anyone want to work with you? If it's hard, but you're doing something about it, then like that's so much more inspirational to the people around you, being like, oh yeah, I want to work with David. Yeah, the industry's hard, but like look at what he's doing to make sure that he's feeling fulfilled as an actor or a podcaster. So that's my tips. That's a long-winded tip.
I love it. It's a good way to approach it. And so with your business, if people are interested, ask now, where do they find you? Where do they find that business? And what services are you offering?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to my Instagram, which is rachel.lauren.baker. And in my little Linktree link, you'll be able to click on it. And my Calendly link is there, so you can book a session with me. And I am doing up a website. I've just had so many things on. So
yeah,
this is the failing forward method of like, I could have waited to launch my business when I had a website, but I was like, no, I'm not going to wait. Like there's people on Instagram that will click the Calendly link and that's fine. And I'll make my website when I have time. So, yeah, if you want to book on the Calendly link, I have a one-off session which if you feel like, you know, you have one thing that you'd want to work on, or you're like, I just feel like I want one session to see how it's going to go, then you can book that. Or I have a three-session package, which is slightly cheaper. And that means that like in the first session, we can get to a couple of or a few different things that you'd like to work on. Second session, we can do the same, like just, you know, what did you notice in the last week or two, and do a few like fixing things. And then the third session would be taking some really big goals that you have and doing the technique of like future pacing to put them into your future and that sort of thing. So those are the two things that I'm offering at the moment. I would love to do like group sessions and stuff in the future, but you know, we can't do everything all at once.
No. Tiny steps. And I'll put links in the show notes for everyone to a bit easier to find it. I should be able to actually pull your Linktree link and put it in there so we can go with that. I'm mindful of the time, Rachel, so I just want to wind it up a bit, but I wanted to bring this discussion just quickly around to some current affairs. And I'm not sure if you've read this, but actress Olivia Colman, who's in The Crown and Wonka productions, amongst others, she just caused a little bit of a ruckus in relation to her comments about self-taping. Have you seen what she said at all?
No, I haven't.
No.
Please tell me.
She said that she's come out and said that self-taped auditions are depriving actors of the opportunity to receive feedback and form in-person connections with the casting directors. So she's really smashed it, which I thought she's not wrong. But then when I started reading some comments about, the discussions on both sides, there's a lot of people saying, hey, hang on a second. You can't just go and knock this straight away, because we're loving the self-tapes, because now we're not stuck in traffic. We're not finding parking. We're not going from audition, getting and spending all their day and having to give up a day's job. So it was really, really interesting on that. How do you see where we are at the moment with self-tapes becoming pretty much the norm? Do you see positives and negatives of the self-tapes and not being in the room anymore?
I think it's such a grey area. You know, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, and there's pros and cons to both. I definitely agree with what Olivia is saying. Like, absolutely. I did a one-on-one coaching session with Michaela Gibson the other week, and she was like, we haven't met in person yet, have we? And I said, no, but I've done plenty of self-tapes for you. So it's really weird to have sent you all these self-tapes and to not have met you in person. and I agree with like, yeah, it's kind of, when you're doing self-tapes, there is that kind of lack of connection with the casting director, and that is unfortunate. I think on the flip side, literally from so many casting directors' mouths, it means that they can audition more actors because they don't have like half an hour slots in a 5-hour period to fill. And so what's that, like 10 actors?
Yes,
Maths?
yeah.
They don't have to just see 10 actors. Like they can put a call out for maybe like 30 self-tapes and then move on to maybe in-person stuff. So it is in a sense depriving us of things, but then it's giving us opportunities in other areas. And what I think it's also like auditioning in general, but specifically self-taping, is what I've noticed in myself is that if I can do a really good tape where I'm literally looking at a blank wall and my partner, who is not an actor, is reading opposite me, and I have like a prop that's like, I don't know, it's not the actual prop, and I'm not in the actual costume that the character would be in. If I can nail a character and an audition in that setting, put me on set. In the setting, in the costume, opposite the other actor who's playing that character, and like, I'm good to go, you know? So in that sense, that's how I've thought about it as well, is I think it's made me such a stronger actor to be able to, like, to have to work with what you've got. So yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. No. And I think everyone's going to have their own opinion, and it's kind of just the way that the industry is going now. Like, I don't think that they will ever not have self-tapes again, to be honest.
No. And you've got to go, the industry changes and you've got to go with the flow, unfortunately, isn't it? Whether it's good or bad, you've got to make it work for you. So now you've got to go and learn lighting and camera to make it the best you can. So
I literally said this to someone the other day. I was like, I really need to learn how to light myself properly, because my 2 box lights just on either side of the camera, like I just feel like I can do a better job.
I'm the same. And some people, you go and watch all the videos. Stephen Walker, who's an actor in Queensland, he's been on my show, and he did a very, very good video on how lighting setups from the one camera to one light, 2 lights, and multiple lights, which is brilliant. But then I tried to replicate it, and I just can't get that right feel. But at the end of the day, as long as your self-tapes, they can see you and they can hear you. That's all that matters, because they want to see your acting, don't they? That's what they want, your performance. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I got some bad advice from someone the other week who sometimes I just choose to ignore people's advice. And you have to do that sometimes.
And you have to do that. It's so important. That person said to me, I found it really distracting that the person that was reading for your self-tape was on Zoom. And I was like, that's so funny, because I literally had a casting director last week say to me, wow, you were so good at reading opposite someone on Zoom for a self-tape. Honestly, like, you are nailing it. So then when someone said, it was really distracting for me, I was like, I don't care.
It's not about the reader anyway. I mean, some people, I've heard, and this is the trouble, Lou Heasom said it yesterday. She says, look, I'll tell you one thing that I believe, and another casting director will tell you the complete opposite. And it's about finding that balance, or finding what works for you. And some of the advice with readers is, make sure you get an actor. But make sure that actor is not being better than you. It doesn't matter. It's about your performance. And if you've got a bad reader, then the job as an actor to try and draw something from them to enhance your performance and make it work. So we learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, Rachel. Well, thank you very much. I wanted to focus a few of my episodes on podcasts that I listen to, and you're the first one that I've brought on, because there's so much out there and so many different avenues of getting education. And here I am as a podcaster myself, and sharing information so my listeners can learn and improve their journeys. but I'm doing it as well by listening to your podcast and many others. So I thank you very much for what you do. Now, I know you're in a hiatus at the moment, but you're coming back with another season soon, I hope, right, once you get your business all up and running.
Yeah. There's like lots of stuff going on at the moment. And unfortunately, podcasting was the thing that had to take a back seat for a bit. But I so want to get back to it. And I now kind of have a bit of a new lease on my career and being like, okay, cool. Yeah. So I'm definitely going to start recording episodes again soon. And yeah, I mean, I've talked about it on my podcast, not to take up more of your time. I talk and talk and talk. So this episode might be a long one. I've been working on a series down in Melbourne. And so going between Sydney and Melbourne and, you know, trying to get that up and running. That's been a whole thing, as well as starting my coaching business and being an actor and just trying to live life as well. Like it's a whole thing. So
the joys.
Oh yeah. So I definitely will be coming back. Awesome. With new episodes. So, yeah.
Well, I'll make sure I put the link for the Don't Be So Dramatic podcast in the links. And while it's on a couple of weeks off, there's plenty of episodes to binge. So we'll get your numbers up there. And as we wind up, Rachel, what one thing would you like to impart onto actors out there and non-actors that listen to the show as well, coming from your background as an actor and podcaster, about how they can improve their careers as an actor or just their well-being in their mindset?
Yeah, I think that the one thing I would say is that whoever you are, whether it's an actor or a creative or someone who's not in the industry at all, I think the most important thing is to believe that you are enough, that you are worthy of what it is that you want. And believing those things is not egotistical, and believing them from like a really, you know, intuitional, like non-egotistical way is, I think, the best way forward. As I said before, like no one's going to wake up in the morning and say, hey, you're enough. Like it's you who has to believe that and truly believe it. And so I think doing the work towards feeling like you are enough, feeling like you are worthy is the most important thing that you can do.
Love it. Thank you very much. Well, this has been the Late Bloomer Actor and Don't Be So Dramatic on screen the same time or in your earbuds at the same time. So Rachel, thank you very much for coming along today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.